Very well, it's closing day here on Newsgang, at least for this year. You'd understand why I may be excited. It has been a tough year. So to see it winding down is a great thing. It is probably the year to forget. In fact, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha asked us as parents to school-going children to consider it a lost year. And truly, that was the case. But all in all, circumstances and challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic notwithstanding, we have every reason to thank God. My reflections tonight are on how the pandemic quickly turned to a political issue, as well as a money-minting opportunity for a few well-connected individuals and crafty business personalities. Granted, there is no crime in pursuing business opportunities, but the cost of such commodities, particularly using public resources, must not only be above board, but value for money. I will come back to share my thoughts on the pandemic profiteers. Let me first share my opinion on how the deadly pandemic was turned to a political ping-pong. Unfortunately so, at one point, wearing a face mask or not was seen as a political statement, despite clear guidance and safety operation procedures crafted by the World Health Organization as well as the Ministry of Health. We all witnessed how the government was divided along the all-too-familiar pro- and anti-handshake wings. Deputy President William Ruto seemingly in isolation, in the government's isolation wing on the COVID-19 pandemic's fight. That was all too clear. On the other hand, that he conducted a series of public rallies with zero regard for social distancing and wearing of face masks spoke volumes about the state of affairs in government and the clear splits between him and the president after yesteryears of bromance and unity. The pandemic also exposed how security forces can be used politically in the guise of enforcing COVID-19 guidelines. We also saw how pro-DP functions were either tear-gassed or stopped, ostensibly to avert spread of the deadly virus, while at the same time, pro-handshake functions went on uninterrupted. That some citizens died as a result of brutality meted on them by police is, in my view, the saddest part of the pandemic this year, only comparable to lives lost as a result of lack of sufficient resources and medical equipment for health workers. And because the pandemic is still with us for the unforeseen period, I hope as we move into the new year, the errors of omission and commission witnessed this year will be avoided, that the county government and the Ministry of Health will do all in their capacity to execute their cardinal function, providing the best care possible to a population that elected them into office 3 years ago. Let me now turn to my pet subject, pandemic profiteers. When COVID-19 pandemic hit our nation in March this year, I gave you an early warning sign that as sure as day follows night, disasterpreneurs and profiteers who hover around every disaster like vultures to benefit would move to Afya House and agencies that would be charged with the responsibility of purchasing critical items required in combating the pandemic. No sooner had we projected this than COVID-19 millionaires, or do I call them billionaires, emerged, with the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, KEMSA, as a crime scene. We have heard ridiculous stories on how procurement regulations were flouted with impunity. But of course, the title clincher was the story of James Njuguna of Lamiguela Holdings, who told the Parliamentary Public Investments Committee, PIC, that he was walking around KEMSA offices, saw a crowd gathered, and out of curiosity went to find out what was cooking, only to leave with 180 million shillings tender for supply of personal protective kits, PPE. Look, I do not believe that cock and bull story, not even for a single minute. Someone somewhere with clear knowledge of what was happening at KEMSA awarded that tender, and many others obviously in total violation of the procurement regulations. I'm not in a place to pass any judgment, but I would say this: what can be seen need not be said. Jim Wallis, an American theologian, writer, teacher, and political activist, said, "Sometimes it takes a natural disaster to reveal a social disaster." End of quote. Last week, I reminded the president of his 21-day order to investigative agencies to unravel the KEMSA scam. 113 days later, We are still waiting. Whatever the case, my heart goes out to the 1,618 patients who have succumbed to COVID-19 since March this year, to the 74,999 Kenyans who have recovered from the virus. It's a show of strength. To the 6,933 patients who are still fighting to recover from the virus, both at home and in various health facilities, I wish you well and quick recovery. Above all, allow me to quote Darren Kagan, an American broadcast journalist and former CNN news anchor. Bad things do happen in the world, like war, natural disasters, and disease. But out of those situations always arise stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. End of quote. To the ordinary Kenyans who have done extraordinary things this COVID-19 period, bravo. Merry Christmas and a happy, blessed, and successful 2021.